Welcome, everyone. Today's Torah portion is Vayera, which is Hebrew for I appeared. This study covers Exodus chapter 6 through Exodus 9:35. We're going to do an overview of that. As I have stated many times before, Yahweh has appeared in our atmosphere throughout time. He is omnipresent, he is omniscient, meaning he's all-knowing, and he's omnipotent, he's all-powerful. We have already seen that he appeared to Moses as a flame in the burning bush, yet the bush didn't burn. Soon we will see him lead his people out of Egypt as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Deuteronomy tells us that Yahweh is a consuming fire. At other times, he appears in the likeness of man, human-like traits. He is present in battles as hailstones are cast and strike only the enemy. The Chariot of Israel was seen by Elisha in our atmosphere as it caught away Elijah. Soon we read about Yahweh descending on Mount Sinai with flames, thunders, and lightnings. Yahusha appeared on the Mount of Transfiguration with Moses and Elijah on the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles. So his presence has come into our atmosphere in various forms. My point is that he is the I am that I am. He has always existed. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the Aleph and the Tav. He is in your very hands when you hold his word, when you hold the Bible in your hands. He is in your very hands. And his creations encompass us every day. At times, his appearing is more obvious than at other times, but he is present at all times. He will never leave us or forsake us. We are presently living out the prophecies of the last days, as we will see in this word spoken by Matthew, January 2016.
We today, as I've said in past teachings, we are coming to the end of our 40-year probationary period since the Iranian Revolution and the fall and takeover of this United States government. We are now coming to the cataclysmic final end where this government is trying to take over other sovereign nations through terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism using ISIS, going against other nations. And we are coming towards the end of our probationary period when there is going to be a judgment upon this generation and those housed within this nation, that if we don't get our exodus right, then we will fall prey to FEMA camps and all of that which comes with it. And to whom did he swear that they should enter into his rest, verse 18? But to them that believe not. So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. Finishing up here, you see, the death of Yeshua himself is called an exodus. An exodus. The death of Yahushua is called an exodus in Luke chapter 9, verse 31 in the Greek. Our life, our trials, our temptations, and our deliverance are foreshadowed through the Exodus account. 1 Corinthians 10 tells us that. We are the assembly. Truly today, we are the assembly in the wilderness. Today, only if you will hear his voice. Our mikveh, our baptism, our ritual immersion was foreshadowed by Israel's passage through the Red Sea. Our feeding on Messiah's flesh, well, that was foreshadowed by Israel's nourishment with the manna. And the blood, which we're supposed to drink, well, that was foreshadowed by Israel's nourishment on that water that came from the rock. Their life truly began with their exodus, and our life truly began with Yahusha's exodus, his death in Jerusalem. Just as Israel was put into a probationary period for 40 years after their exodus, our audience that the writer of the book of Hebrews is writing to, they are now living in their probationary period of 40 years. It was about 40 years after Yahusha's exodus that they were living, and they were coming to the very climatic end of their probationary period. And that was the sense of urgency. Today, if you hear his voice, because tomorrow the temple might fall down. Because they were coming to the end of their 40-year probationary period. Therefore, it was a sense of urgency that if they did not cross over with ritual immersion and come into the commonwealth of faith, then they would face the judgment, which was death, upon that generation. Likewise, we today, as I've said in past teachings, we are coming to the end of our 40-year probationary period since the Iranian Revolution and the fall and takeover of this United States government. We are now coming to the cataclysmic final end where this government is trying to take over other sovereign nations through terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism using ISIS, going against other nations. And we are coming towards the end of our probationary period when there is going to be a judgment upon this generation and those housed within this nation, that if we don't get our exodus right, then we will fall prey to FEMA camps and all of that which comes with it. So we have to be prepared. We have to be ready. If we can hear his voice, today is that day. Even in Qumran literature, there was an expectation of the 40 years between the death of the religious teacher and the consuming of all men of war who returned with the man of falsehood. You see, we're living, I believe, in a parallel reality to those in Kadesh Barnea. We're living in a parallel reality to the audience of the book of Hebrews, not only in light of the upcoming 40-year physical judgment upon our generation, when our government got sold out after the Iranian Revolution, which with that, you're going to get all of the Islamic pushback because of that. And that's what's happening. It's been fermented. And it is not by coincidence we have a Jesuit Pope in these last days. A Jesuit Pope. If you look at how the Jesuits are connected and fermenting this and have been fermenting this for centuries, we have to see that you and I are going to face intense resistance that parallels the opposition that the children of Israel faced from the inhabitants of the land. And it parallels the persecution the Hebrews audience suffered. Why? What do we have in common with the audience and the wilderness generation? You and I, we have severed our relationship with the established religious systems. The wilderness generation, they severed their relationship with the established religious systems of Egypt. The Hebrews audience, they had severed their relationship with the established Levitical hierarchy religious systems. And you and I, we have severed our relationships with the established Christian doctrine and messianic dogma and doctrines that many of you have been a part of for the past decade or so, trying to seek out the truth and realizing that just leads you back into Levitical hierarchy and Jewish genealogy chasing. You see, it really is a time where we have renounced the establishment's religions, and therefore we will incur the wrath of that religious community, sometimes just with passing conversations with friends and sometimes with foes. For me, I've experienced it from the Messianic community, and of course, before that, the traditional Calvary Chapel community that I came out of. And for you, well, all of you, you have your own stories of how you were plucked out. But our author admonishes us, believe, stay the course, and stick with Yahweh, and you will be secure. Because ultimately, he has given us the victory at Yahusha's exodus.
Today's Torah portion shows us that Yahweh delivers his people without fail, then and now. This Torah portion covers the first 7 plagues or judgments coming upon Egypt. Yahweh sends messages through Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh to let his people go. Today, we find ourselves in the same predicament, whether some would admit it or not. We are in so-called quote unquote Egypt. We are in Mystery Babylon led by the global cabal. And once more, he will lead us out by his mighty right hand. Soon, in our day and time, the 2 witnesses of Revelation 11 will be given an added measure to prophesy 1,260 days. The signs that we are in Egypt are all around us, from pagan holidays, celebrations, to the erected obelisks in almost every town and nation. The worldly system of unrighteous decrees and lawlessness are encroaching on worldwide daily freedoms. The oppression is increasing not only on adults, but on the children. The only way out is to find the narrow path that leads to life, and that is Yahusha HaMashiach. He came to set the captives free. The key to our deliverance is the Passover. Each must come to the foot of the crucifixion tree with a sincere, repentant heart, desiring to receive Yahusha HaMashiach as their Savior. By doing so, we accept his proposal and enter in to his new covenant, ratified by his own precious blood once and for all, and partake of the bread and wine of the covenant confirming meal. This is our betrothal. We are immediately justified at the foot of the crucifixion tree, just as if we had never sinned. We then mature as his bride, following covenant Torah, our marriage ketuvah, our covenant contract. Our life revolves around being set apart to him as we go through the sanctification process. Then on the last day, we will receive our glorification when mortality puts on immortality, corruption puts on incorruption. We know from the One New Man series that Yahweh wants not only to deliver us from sin, but from our natural man and from supernatural evil entities, principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. So when we come to that foot of the cross, we are justified just as if we had never sinned. He's made full atonement for us, at one meant for us. We are sanctified daily as we mature in him, and soon and very soon we will receive our glorified bodies. Only by the blood of the Passover lamb can we partake in the greater Exodus. The Passover was observed in Exodus 12 with their loins girded and their sandals on their feet, their staff in their hand, and they ate in haste. They were on high alert. They were not sleeping with their alarm clocks set. The Passover is the feast of fleeing and the night of watches, then and now. We need to remember that about the Passover. The Passover is the feast of fleeing and the night of watches. This is the feast of the Exodus. Passover is a high watch feast. Yes, Yahusha came as our Passover spotless lamb, but he is also coming again for his remnant bride. The season of Passover still has future fulfillment. The baby in Revelation 12 is about to be gestationally mature for birth. Typical gestation for a pregnancy is 40 weeks. No coincidence. 40, is that not significant? Does a woman rest peacefully during the ever increasing birth pains leading up to delivery? No. Was it a coincidence that last week we reviewed the prophetic counting calendar, not to be confused with our annual calendar? We reviewed the prophetic counting calendar that we've looked at for over a year of a 360-day year, and the 1,260th day fell exactly in the very midst of the last 7 years. The 1,260th day fell exactly on the 10th day of the first month when the lamb is selected for Passover. And that's going to be the deciding point that determines people's destinies. That is the decision point. Are you going to be deceived by Satan, or are you going to hear his still small voice and respond to him, the spotless lamb, not the counterfeit? There's already a great falling away, and that should not be. If we knew his word, if we stayed in his word, that should not be. Of course, you would miss this all if you observe Satan's Ishtar fertility goddess Easter holiday. Study it out. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. It's your life. You want to be born anew and enter into his kingdom or not? That's the question. Isaiah 46:9-10. Remember the former events of old, for I am El, and there is no one else, Elohim, and there is no one like me. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from of old, that which has not yet been done, saying, my counsel does stand, and all my delight I do. Exodus 6:2-5. And Elohim spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Yahweh, and I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, and my name, Yahweh, was I not known to them? And I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their sojournings in which they have sojourned. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Mitzrites are enslaving, and I remembered my covenant. The first Exodus was lateral to the promised land. The greater Exodus will be vertical. Exodus 6:6-8 reviews the 7 I wills of Yahweh. These connect to the promises with Passover as follows. Say therefore to the children of Israel, I am Yahweh. I shall bring you out from under the burdens of the Mitzrites. That equates to the sanctification. and shall deliver you from their enslaving. That's the deliverance that he provided for us. And shall redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments, and shall take you as my people. That's the praise that we give him. And I shall be your Elohim, and you shall know that I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who is bringing you out from under the burdens of the Mitzrites. And I shall bring you into the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to give it to you as an inheritance. I am Yahweh. So the 7 I shalls of Yahweh. I shall bring you out from under the burdens of Egypt. I shall deliver you from their enslaving. I shall redeem you with my outstretched arm and with great judgments. And we will see these judgment plagues come upon the earth in the end of days. I shall take you as my people. I shall be your Elohim. You shall know that I am Yahweh, your Elohim, that brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I shall bring you into the land I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to give it to you as an inheritance. I am Yahweh. Verse 9 through 13, and Moses spoke thus to the children of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses because of shortness of spirit and from hard slavery. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, go in, speak to Pharaoh, sovereign of Egypt, to let the children of Israel go out of his land. And Moses spoke before Yahweh, saying, the children of Israel have not listened to me. And why would Pharaoh listen to me? For I am of uncircumcised lips. There's a struggle right there in Moses's soul realm. He's feeling inadequate. He's feeling emotional. He's doubting himself. He's in his soul realm. And he's not letting the spirit of Elohim calm him and strengthen him and obey him and listen to a still small voice. And Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron and gave them a command for the children of Israel and for Pharaoh, sovereign of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. There are times in life when the pain is so great and the spirit so broken that Yahweh listens to the very groanings of our hearts. There's no words that can express it. The brokenness within. He hears that. He knows what each person is dealing with of his. You are the apple of his eye. Why would he not know? He's omniscient. He's all-knowing. This appears to be one of those times. They didn't listen to Moses because of shortness of spirit and from the extremely hard labor. In other words, they were at one of their weakest and lowest moments in their lives. But we know that during such times, Yahweh is the strongest in our lives because it's all relying on him, leading us out with his mighty right hand, not our power. He is the vine, we are the branches. Without him, we can do nothing, absolutely nothing. Because the people didn't listen, Moses questions Yahweh as to how Pharaoh would listen. All doubts aside, Moses and Aaron are given the command to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. When called to do something by Yahweh, you just take one day or one command at a time. You will not be given a detailed plan. Each step of faith releases the next step to take. Yahweh wants us to flee from idolatry, which is all around us. One might ask, well, if it is all around us, where do we flee? Well, we flee to him. He is our ark of mercy, grace, and salvation. He is our refuge and our strength. Walk in his footsteps. Stay in his word. In Psalm 46, 1 and 2, we read, Elohim is our refuge and strength, a help in distress, soon found. Therefore, we do not fear, though the earth reels and mountains topple into the heart of the seas, we do not fear. I came across this excerpt from Tim Foster 405 on YouTube, and he has a community tab where he posts some of his studies. And I know Bill had brought this up before about the 24th day of the 9th month that's written in Haggai chapter 2. I wanted to share this because this is where Yahweh led me. Why is the date of Kislev 24 stated 3 times in Haggai 2? And this is only an excerpt. This isn't the whole thing. In the 2nd chapter of Haggai, the prophet refers to the 24th day of the 9th month 3 times. Do you think Elohim is trying to emphasize a date concerning the quote unquote shaking the heavens? Are we being told that just after this date, we should expect to see Elohim take action? And what is Elohim getting ready to do? And he references the blue highlighted areas. Will the Antichrist be taking over the world, or Yahusha? And he references Hebrews 12, 22 through 24 for the culmination of this event, where there is a reunion in the heavenly New Jerusalem. Haggai 2, verse 1, in the 7th month, on the 21st day of the month, the word of Yahweh came by the hand of Haggai the prophet. Speak now, Zerubbabel, to the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and to all the remnant of the people, and say, who is left among you who saw this house in its former glory? How do you see it now? Is it not as nothing in your eyes? Yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, declares Yahweh. Be strong, O Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Be strong, all you people of the land, declares Yahweh. Work, for I am with you, declares Yahweh of hosts. According to the covenant that I made with you when you came out of Egypt, my spirit remains in your midst. Fear not. For thus says Yahweh of hosts, yet once more, in a little while, I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land. I will shake all nations so that the treasures of all nations shall come in. This could be pertaining to the first fruits, the catching away could be. And I will fill this house with glory, says Yahweh of hosts. This silver, which he refers to as possibly the second catching away, the second fruits, is mine. And the gold, the first fruits, is mine, declares Yahweh of hosts. The latter glory of this house shall be greater than the former, or says Yahweh of hosts. And in this place I will give peace, declares Yahweh of hosts. Verse 10, on the 24th day of the 9th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, the word of Yahweh came by Haggai the prophet. Thus says the Lord of hosts, ask the priest about the law. If someone carries holy meat in the fold of his garment and touches with his fold bread or stew or wine or oil or any kind of food, does it become holy? The priest answered and said, no. Now then, consider from this day onward, before stone was placed upon stone in the temple of Yahweh, how did you fare? When one came to a heap of 20 measures, there were but 10. When one came to the wine vat to draw 50 measures, there were but 20. I struck you and all the products of your toil with blight and with mildew and with hail. You did not turn to me, declares Yahweh. Consider from this day onward, from the 24th day of the 9th month, since the day that the foundation of Yahweh's temple was laid. Consider, is the seed, the sons of the kingdom, the 144,000 he cross-references, Matthew 12:38, yet in the barn? Indeed, the vine, the fig tree, the pomegranate, and the olive tree have yielded nothing. But from this day on, I will bless you. Yahweh is our kinsman redeemer. He is our avenger of blood. The cup of redemption is drunk once a year and not weekly. The weekly observance of communion, quote unquote, is not biblical, but mirrors the cult observances of Dionysus. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, 14 through 22. Therefore, my beloved ones, flee from idolatry. I speak as to wise men. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not a sharing in the blood of Messiah? The bread that we break, is it not a sharing in the body of Messiah? Because there is one bread. We who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. Look at Israel after the flesh. Are not those who eat of the slaughterings sharers in the slaughter place? What then do I say? That an idol is of any value? Or that which is slaughtered to idols is of any value? No, but what the nations slaughter, they slaughter to demons and not to Elohim. And I do not wish you to become sharers with demons. You are not able to drink the cup of the master and the cup of demons. You are not able to partake of the table of the master and of the table of demons. Do we provoke the master to jealousy? Are we stronger than he?
Before this Passover comes up, this is 2015. Before this Passover comes up, all double-mindedness, it's got to end. It has to end. It's either all or nothing. It's either all or nothing. Get in or get out of Shabbat. Get in or get out of the Feast of Yahweh. Get in or get out of what's fit and proper to put in your body. In or out. But all of this monkeying around in the middle of the fence, it's just not going to work. It's get in or get out. We don't have time to mess around. Either partake of Yeshua's cup or go and mess around with the cup of demons. But don't do both and come to the master's table. In or out. In or out. And do you know how many messianics still mess around with that cup? Still. Because they haven't been instructed. Don't know where it comes from. Don't know what the Romans were doing down by the Tiber River to Bacchus on a Sunday morning at sunrise, which came from Dionysus. It's amazing. Rav Shaliach Shaul said what? He said, be crucified in Mashiach. How the heck can we be crucified with Mashiach if we don't even bother showing up at the Passover Seder? Can you explain that to me? You have got to present yourself at Passover. He says, eat my flesh and drink my blood. How can you do that if you don't show up at Passover? You see, the cup that Yeshua drank, that third cup of redemption, was a cup that establishes our covenant. We need to drink of that.
We have the genealogy of Moses and Aaron. I'm not going to go line by line, but we do see in verse 16 that these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations: Gershon, Korath, and Merari. And the years of the life of Levi was 137. And it was the clans of the Levites that encamped around the dwelling place. Yahweh's priests are positionally the closest to him. Under the Melchizedek priesthood, he now has made us a kingdom of priests from every tongue, tribe, people, and nation. Then in verse 23, we see Aaron took himself Elisheva, daughter of Amminadab, sister of Nahshon, as wife, and she bore him Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. So we see right there the blending of the tribes of Levi and the tribe of Judah. Elisheva was of the royal tribe of Judah, the sister to Nahshon. As we continue in Exodus, it will not be long before the Aaronic Levitical priesthood will be formed to implement the book of the law after the sin of the golden calf, which takes place in Exodus 32. Prior to that point, Aaron was very much a part of the Melchizedek priesthood led by Moses. I mean, we will even see that his first two sons there in verse 23, Nadab and Abihu, are even present at the covenant confirming meal in Exodus 24. They were part of the Melchizedek kingdom of priests prior to the Aaronic Levitical priesthood ever being established. So Aaron was very much a part of the Melchizedek priesthood led by Moses. Therefore, due to this prior union between the tribe of Levi and the tribe of Judah, there was a link established to the Aaronic Levitical priesthood and the royal line of Judah. This developed from Aaron, coming from the tribe of Levi, taking Elisheva, tribe of Judah, as his wife. In Matthew 1, it records this connection to the righteous seed line in the genealogy of Yahusha HaMashiach, our prophet, king, and priest, after the order of Melchizedek. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 4, and Ram brought forth Amminadab, and Amminadab brought forth Nahshon. So Yahweh said to Moses, see, I have made you an Elohim to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother is your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and Aaron your brother shall speak to Pharaoh, to let the children of Israel go out of his land. But I am going to harden the heart of Pharaoh, and shall increase my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh is not going to listen to you, and I shall lay my hand on Egypt and bring my divisions and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. So right there in verse 3, harden the heart of Pharaoh. What part of his tripartite being would that be? Of course, that would be his soul realm. Pharaoh, we know, is an unregenerate man, and his soul and fleshly spirit are working in tandem based on his own will and desires. And then in verse 4, by Yahweh's hand, it gives Yahweh the characteristics, human-like characteristics, when it speaks that I shall lay my hand on Egypt. And also with my divisions, that is showing that Yahweh is changing their mentality from a slave mentality to a warrior mentality. So Yahweh is shifting his people from a slave mentality to a warrior mentality. And that is defined clearly when you look up the word divisions, sometimes recorded as my armies. And great judgments, of course, would be the coming plagues upon Egypt. And a similar pattern will unfold in our day as well. Then in Exodus 7, verse 6 through 13, we're going to see in verse 13 is the first showdown, if you will, between Yahweh's power against the Egyptian practitioners of witchcraft and magicians. It is not much of a contest, however. When Aaron throws down his rod and it becomes a serpent, it ends up eating the serpent rods brought forth through the magicians and those practicing witchcraft. Serpent defined is a marine or land monster, that is, sea serpent or jackal, dragon, sea monster, serpent, or whale. And even after this, Pharaoh's heart or his soul realm once more is strengthened. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. And these powers and principalities, they're located all over the 7 continents. Satan's army is organized in military fashion as well. Satan is the top principality. Principalities give orders to powers. These, in turn, give orders to the demonic entities, the rulers of darkness, and the spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. So the main takeaway is that they're opposing witchcraft, sorcery spirits they perform under are still in existence very much today, and their evil powers are practiced. They are defeated, though, before they've even begun. Yahusha has already won the war. There may be still more prophetic battles ahead, but he's won the war. Satan is a defeated foe. Similar occult powers are seen through the adulterous, seducing spirits of Jezebel and Delilah, and the slow kill, cat and mouse, restrict and release type spirit of Puthon, better known as Python. These spirits are dubbed by prominent analogous names that describe their main evil, bewitching technique. So right there in those few verses, and Moses and Aaron did as Yahweh commanded them, so they did. Now Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. And Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, show a miracle for yourselves, then you shall say to Aaron, take your rod and throw it before Pharaoh, and let it become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so, as Yahweh commanded. And Aaron threw his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. But Pharaoh also called the wise men and the practitioners of witchcraft, and they, the magicians of Egypt, also did with their magic. And they, each one, threw down his rod, and they became serpents. But the rod of Aaron swallowed up their rods. And Pharaoh's heart was strengthened, and he did not listen to them as Yahweh had said. Exactly what do we know about these magicians? In 2 Timothy 3:8, it gives us a clue as well as an excerpt I took from Bible Hub. 2 Timothy 3:8, and as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so do these also oppose the truth. Men of corrupt minds found worthless concerning the belief or the faith. So Jannes and Jambres, the names occur in the New Testament, and they are not mentioned in the Old Testament at all. These are the names of 2 magicians in ancient Egypt who withstood Moses before Pharaoh. This is the only place where in Exodus chapter 7, verse 11 and verse 22, Egyptian magicians are spoken of who were called upon by Pharaoh to oppose Moses and Aaron. Then Pharaoh also called for the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did in like manner with their enchantments. Jannes and Jambres were evidently 2 of the persons referred to in this passage. It should be observed that the word translated here, magicians, occurs also in Genesis 41, verse 8, in connection with Pharaoh's dreams. Pharaoh sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. The revised version margin reads for magicians or sacred scribes. The Hebrew word is chartumim and means sacred scribes who were skilled in the sacred writing, that is in the hieroglyphics. They were a variety of Egyptian priests. Jannes and Jambres were doubtless members of one or other of the various classes spoken of in the passages in Exodus and Genesis. The wise men, so-called, quote unquote, wise men, the sorcerers, and the magicians or sacred scribes. So with the 10 plagues, we will see 3 sets of 3 plagues, which equals 9. We will see 3 sets of 3 plagues, followed by the final judgment plague, which will be the death of the firstborn. The 3 sets of 3 plagues follow a pattern. So they're all grouped in 3s, and each grouping begins with a warning of the plague by the water. It's followed by a warning of the plague by the palace location. And thirdly, there is no warning given. The warning of the first plague by the water was the turning the river into blood. This was ridiculously mimicked by the magicians who would want to make the matter worse, but they did. So go figure. Yahweh made this plague last 7 days, and all the fish died, causing a great stench, and there was no fresh water. Though some may speculate the redness could have been caused by the red earth or a type of algae, the scriptures define it as dam, blood, or figuratively could be defined as wine. Fish can survive dirty water and even many kinds of algae, but in this case, the scriptures says it was turned to blood. The Nile River was very important to the Egyptians, especially the fish in the Nile. Some of those fish were also considered sacred to the Egyptians. Now, I mentioned this last week as well, that the plagues of Egypt are well known, but a deep study reveals that each was a direct challenge to the various Egyptian gods and goddesses. And we know in the last 12 campsites in the wilderness had heavy spiritual warfare, and it is no different for us in our day. The increase in spiritual warfare can be expected because we will know the end from the beginning. So the plagues affected the Egyptians' physical senses as well as their hearts, with reminders that Yahweh was far superior to any other little g gods. He exercised power at will while the Egyptian gods remained helpless against him. So this chart goes into those little g gods, but they're little g gods, so I'm not going to spend much time with them. Next, it was a plague of frogs. Moses instructed Aaron to stretch out his hand with his rod over all the waters of Egypt, and the frogs covered the land. The magicians also bring frogs upon the land of Egypt. Again, go figure. They just want to add insult to injury. That wasn't the wisest thing to do. But if the magicians were truly powerful, my question is, why wouldn't Pharaoh ask his magicians to rid the land of the frogs? Pharaoh humbles himself for a moment and calls Moses and Aaron to pray to Yahweh to take away the frogs from himself and the people, and he would let the people go to slaughter to Yahweh. For Pharaoh to know the power of Yahweh, Moses asks Pharaoh for the specifics of exactly where he would like the frogs maintained and when he would want them to pray. Pharaoh confirms to have them only in the river and for them to pray tomorrow. So Yahweh, in perfect timing, turned aside the frogs, and they died out, and they remained only in the river. The messy, stinky cleanup followed. Having relief from the frogs, Pharaoh hardens his heart and does not listen to Moses and Aaron. Next, we have the gnats. With the third plague comes no warning, correct? Because we've just looked at 3, and the last one comes with no warning. Yahweh instructs Moses to tell Aaron to stretch out his rod and strike the dust of the land, and the dust becomes gnats on all the land, on man and beast. The magicians cannot duplicate this, and they tell Pharaoh that this is the finger of Elohim. But Pharaoh doesn't listen. This concludes the first set of 3 plagues: water to blood, frogs, and gnats. Now the flies in Exodus chapter 8, verse 20 through 32. And I'm just giving summations. Now, the second set of 3 plagues begins, and it begins with the flies. Yahweh tells Moses to meet Pharaoh as he comes down to the water to give him warning, right? Because this is the second set of 3. And since this is the first one, there's a warning by the water. There would be swarms of flies that would cover the whole land of Egypt, except for Goshen, where his people were, so that Pharaoh would know that Yahweh was in the midst of the land. The swarms of flies come. Again, Pharaoh calls Moses and Aaron to pray to Yahweh to take the flies away. Pharaoh tells Moses that they can slaughter in the land, but Moses tells Pharaoh that would not work. Moses again tells Pharaoh that they must go a 3-day journey into the wilderness to slaughter. Pharaoh agrees at first. The flies are sent away at the time of Moses's prayer to Yahweh. Then Pharaoh again hardens his heart. Keep in mind, though we are reading about these plagues with the first Exodus, we know the book of Revelation tells us that similar plagues will happen in the end of days. Next, it's going to affect the livestock. It is difficult to understand the degree of hard-heartedness that Pharaoh demonstrates. But sadly, in our day, in our times, in this season of our life, we look around and we see the hard-heartedness of people, and it confounds us. It absolutely confounds us. To them, one's nose at Yahweh is ultimate foolishness. When man believes he can stand against the Almighty, the omnipotent, the one true living Elohim, that is truly ridiculous. You would think such behavior would be a rare occurrence, but sadly, that is not the case. Throughout history, man has turned their backs against Yahweh to their own shame and their demise. From the sin of the golden calf to the sinful lighting of the minaret of the One World Trade Center, glorifying infanticide laws, both were public displays of depraved Molekian worship. There's nothing new under the sun. This world still worships Molech, Satan. We see in Exodus 9, Yahweh sends Moses to the palace to tell Pharaoh the 5th plague that will strike the Egyptian livestock, but the plague will not strike the livestock of Israel. The plague takes place because Pharaoh's heart is hardened. Yet Pharaoh sends to see if the Israelites' livestock suffered. It is confirmed that they did not. So the Israelites' livestock, they were fine. Now Pharaoh must know without a doubt, Eloah is even in the midst of the land of Egypt. The sixth plague is the last of the second set of 3 plagues, and it's the boils. This plague comes without warning, and Yahweh instructs Moses and Aaron to gather ashes from the furnaces. Moses is to throw the ashes toward heaven in front of Pharaoh. It is done as instructed, and grievous boils break out on man and beast, which also causes the magicians not to be able to stand against them. Matter of fact, we haven't seen anything from the magicians since their inability to turn the dust to gnats. This plague completes the second set of 3 plagues. So the second set of the 3 plagues, gnats, livestock, and boils. And in this Torah portion, we will only cover the next plague, which is the 7th plague. This is going to be hail, and it is recorded in Exodus 9:13 through 35. With the continuance of the final plagues, we will see the why given by Yahweh in Exodus 9:16. Yahweh has Moses warn and meet Pharaoh and tell him in verse 16 of chapter 9, and for this reason, I have raised you up in order to show you my power and in order to declare my name in all the earth. In other words, not your little g gods. I did this in order to show you my power and in order to declare my name in all the earth. Yahweh would now send hail like never seen before in Egypt. Moses instructs Pharaoh that his servants and livestock should be taken into shelter, or else they would face death. Some people fear and they heed the warning, and some do not. If shelter is not heeded, human life would be taken as well. In Luke chapter 11, it's also part of our Torah portion today in the New Testament, or the Brit Hadashah. Now, this is going to connect us to the number 40, and that's why I'm reviewing this. The number 40 is what Yahweh placed on my heart last evening and into this morning. And he was casting out a demon, and it was dumb. And it came to be when the demon had gone out that the dumb spoke, and the crowds marveled. But some of them said, he cast out demons by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. And others, trying him, were seeking from him a sign from heaven. And he, knowing their thoughts, said to them, every reign divided against itself is laid waste, and a house divided against a house falls. So if Satan also is divided against himself, how shall his reign stand? Because you say, I cast out demons by Beelzebub? Now, if I cast out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your sons cast them out? Because of this, they shall be your judges. But if I cast out demons by the finger of Elohim, then the reign of Elohim has come upon you. When a strong man, having been well armed, watches over his own court, his possessions are in peace. But when a stronger than he comes upon him and overcomes him, he takes from him all his armor in which he trusted and divides his booty. He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters. Those that gathered blasphemously accused Yahusha of casting out the demons by Beelzebub. This ultimately leads to the destruction of Jerusalem approximately 40 years later for the rejection of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. Similarly, the refusal of entering Kadesh Barnea by faith led to 40 years wandering in the desert. We too, in the nation of America, have had 7 presidents since 1978 sign the USA Education Day resolution, which cloaks the Babylonian Talmudic Noahide laws that are of the anti-Messiah spirit, and those laws vehemently oppose Yahusha HaMashiach. Now, when I wrote this was back in 2018. Since 1978, 7 U.S. presidents to date in 2018 that have held the highest office in this nation signed this document knowingly or unknowingly, declaring man-made laws higher than the authority of Yahusha HaMashiach. It was cloaked as the USA Education Day resolution, which became U.S. Public Law 10214 in 1991, signed off then by President George H.W. Bush. March 2018 marked the 40th year anniversary of signing this resolution that became law. It is also the 40th anniversary of the Iranian Revolution and the fallen takeover of this U.S. government. And we watched that video at the beginning. I am going to replay that video at the end because as we've gone through this Torah portion, we've gleaned more insights, and sometimes it's worth repeating these key points. Now, make no mistakes, these Noahide laws are not only being pushed in the United States, they're being pushed all across the earth. And so we keep that in mind because under such laws, it states that one cannot even say the name of Yahusha, cannot say the name of Jesus, and can be condemned to death by only one witness. Totally unbiblical. The Talmudic Babylonian Talmud is not Yahweh's word. That's the doctrines of men. They just blend in phrases and words that confuse people, like naming their laws the Noahide laws. It makes everyday lukewarm believers that, oh, it must be good, it's from Noah. No, they twist the scriptures and they add to his word. And that is exactly what Yahusha said not to do. Now, I'm briefly going to review some key scriptures that will drive the importance of the number 40 home. 40 appears 3 times in this week's Torah portion in Ezekiel, and once in Acts chapter 1, verse 3 in today's daily devotional reading. And you may want to start your daily devotional reading today because we need to delve into his word. And this would be a good time to start because it starts with Genesis 1:1 today. And I have those laid out for you at thelibbylink.com under daily reading. Now, you can skim through it. You can read it word for word, but whatever you do, just invest time to commune with Yahweh. See what scripture he leads you to. What is he wanting to say to you? You may just go to one or two verses. You may go to one book that's focused on that day, but invest that time in communing with Yahweh. This number 40 prompted me to do a sampling. And even though the number 40 appears 160 times and 146 verses, I'm just going to glean through them. For instance, Genesis 7, verse 4. For after 7 more days, I am sending rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights. Again, we will know the end from the beginning. Genesis 25:20, Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as wife. Interesting. Genesis 26:34, Esau was 40 years old when he took as wives Yehudith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. Genesis 53, and 40 days were completed for him, for so are completed the days of embalming. Exodus 16:35, and the children of Israel ate manna 40 years. Exodus 24:18, Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Exodus 26:19, and make 40 sockets of silver under the 20 boards. Exodus 34:28, and he was there with Yahweh 40 days and 40 nights. Numbers 13:25, and they returned from spying out the land after 40 days. Numbers 14:34, according to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, a day for a year, a day for a year. Deuteronomy 25:3, 40 strikes he gives him, but no more. Joshua 4:13, about 40,000 armed ones of the army passed over before Yahweh for battle to the desert plains of Jericho. Joshua 14:7, I was 40 years old. Now this is an important timestamp to remember. Joshua 14:7, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of Yahweh, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought back word to him as it was in my heart. Now, Joshua 14:10, and now, see, Yahweh has kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years since Yahweh spoke this word to Moses while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, see, I am 85 years old today. Judges 3:11, and the land had rest for 40 years. Judges 5:8. Neither a shield nor spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. Judges 12:14, and he had 40 sons. Judges 13:1, so Yahweh gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. 1 Samuel 4:18, that Eli fell off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for the man was old and heavy. He ruled Israel 40 years. And for 40 days, the Philistine drew near morning and evening and took his stand. 1 Samuel 17:16. 2 Samuel 2:10. Ishbosheth, son of Shaul, was 40 years old. 2 Samuel 5:4. David reigned 40 years. 2 Samuel 15:7. And it came to be at the end of 40 years that Absalom said to the sovereign, please let me go to Hebron and pay the vow which I vowed to Yahweh. 1 Kings 6:17, and the house was 40 cubits. 1 Kings 11:42. And the days that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was also 40 years, just like David, King David. 1 Kings 19:8. And he rose up and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. I believe that's speaking of Elijah. 2 Kings 12:1. YHWH began to reign in the 7th year of Jehu, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. And in today's Torah portion in Ezekiel 29 verses 11 through 13, that's where it appears 3 times, but I grabbed Ezekiel 4 verse 6 as well. And when you have completed them, you shall lie again on your right side and shall bear the crookedness of the house of Judah 40 days, a day for a year. I have laid on you a day for a year. Ezekiel 29:11 through 13. No foot of man shall pass through it, nor foot of beast pass through it, neither shall it be inhabited for 40 years. And I shall make the land of Egypt a desert in the midst of the lands that are waste, and among the cities that are ruined. Her cities shall be a waste 40 years. And I shall scatter the Mitzrites among the nations, and I shall disperse them throughout the lands. For thus said the Master Yahweh, at the end of 40 years, I shall gather the Mitzrites from the peoples among whom they were scattered. Jonah, verse 4 of chapter 3. And Jonah began to go into the city on the first day's walk, and he cried out and said, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Matthew chapter 4, verse 2. And after having fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry, speaking of Yahusha. It's also recorded in Mark and another gospel. Mark 1, verse 13 says, and he was there in the wilderness 40 days, tried by Satan, and was with the wild beast. And the messengers attended him. See, his angelic messengers do have purpose. Acts chapter 1, verse 3. To whom he also presented himself alive after his suffering by many infallible proofs, being seen by them, the apostles, for 40 days, speaking concerning the reign of Elohim. So after his resurrection, he was seen, Yahusha was seen by them 40 days. And here we have Stephen's testimony in several verses of Acts chapter 7. Acts chapter 7, verse 23. And when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel, speaking of Moses. And he also recalls in verse 30 of Acts 7, and after 40 years were completed, a messenger of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush. So that was when Moses was in Midian, because we know Moses's life is broken up into 40-year segments, 40 years being raised under Pharaoh, 40 years in Midian with his father-in-law Yitro, and 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And in Acts 7:36, this one led them out after he had done wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years, speaking of Moses. Acts 13:18, now for a time about 40 years, he sustained them in the wilderness. That was interesting. Now for a time about 40 years, he sustained them in the wilderness. Acts 13:21, but then they asked for a sovereign, and Elohim gave them Shaul, or known as Saul to many, the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, for 40 years. So we see 40 frequently. Now, what I'd like us to do is also close with the video excerpt we opened with and see if we all do not glean more of the parallels. And I think this is important to do. So let's listen.
We today, as I've said in past teachings, we are coming to the end of our 40-year probationary period since the Iranian Revolution and the fall and takeover of this United States government. We are now coming to the cataclysmic final end where this government is trying to take over other sovereign nations through terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism using ISIS, going against other nations. And we are coming towards the end of our probationary period when there is going to be a judgment upon this generation and those housed within this nation, that if we don't get our exodus right, then we will fall prey to FEMA camps and all of that which comes with it. And to whom did he swear that they should enter into his rest, verse 18? But to them that believe not. So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. Finishing up here, you see, the death of Yeshua himself is called an exodus. An exodus. The death of Yahusha is called an exodus in Luke chapter 9, verse 31 in the Greek. Our life, our trials, our temptations, and our deliverance are foreshadowed through the Exodus account. 1 Corinthians 10 tells us that. We are the assembly. Truly today, we are the assembly in the wilderness. Today, only if you will hear his voice. Our mikvah, our baptism, our ritual immersion was foreshadowed by Israel's passage through the Red Sea. Our feeding on Messiah's flesh, well, that was foreshadowed by Israel's nourishment with the manna. And the blood, which we're supposed to drink, well, that was foreshadowed by Israel's nourishment on that water that came from the rock. Their life truly began with their exodus, and our life truly began with Yahusha's exodus, his death in Jerusalem. Just as Israel was put into a probationary period for 40 years after their exodus, our audience that the writer of the book of Hebrews is writing to, they are now living in their probationary period of 40 years. It was about 40 years after Yahusha's exodus that they were living, and they were coming to the very climatic end of their probationary period. And that was the sense of urgency. Today, if you hear his voice, because tomorrow the temple might fall down. Because they were coming to the end of their 40-year probationary period. Therefore, it was a sense of urgency that if they did not cross over with ritual immersion and come into the commonwealth of faith, then they would face the judgment which was death upon that generation. Likewise, we today, as I've said in past teachings, we are coming to the end of our 40-year probationary period since the Iranian Revolution and the fall and takeover of this United States government. We are now coming to the cataclysmic final end where this government is trying to take over other sovereign nations through terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism using ISIS, going against other nations. And we are coming towards the end of our probationary period when there is going to be a judgment upon this generation and those housed within this nation, that if we don't get our exodus right, then we will fall prey to FEMA camps and all of that which comes with it. So we have to be prepared. We have to be ready. If we can hear his voice, today is that day. Even in Qumran literature, There was an expectation of the 40 years between the death of the religious teacher and the consuming of all men of war who returned with the man of falsehood. You see, we're living, I believe, in a parallel reality to those in Kadesh Barnea. We're living in a parallel reality to the audience of the book of Hebrews, not only in light of the upcoming 40-year physical judgment upon our generation, when our government got sold out after the Iranian Revolution, which with that, you're going to get all of the Islamic pushback because of that. And that's what's happening. It's been fermented. And it is not by coincidence we have a Jesuit Pope in these last days. A Jesuit Pope. If you look at how the Jesuits are connected and fermenting this and have been fermenting this for centuries, we have to see that you and I are going to face intense resistance that parallels the opposition that the children of Israel faced from the inhabitants of the land. And it parallels the persecution the Hebrews audience suffered. Why? What do we have in common with the audience and the wilderness generation? You and I, we have severed our relationship with the established religious systems. The wilderness generation, they severed their relationship with the established religious systems of Egypt. The Hebrews audience, they had severed their relationship with the established Levitical hierarchy religious systems. And you and I, we have severed our relationships with the established Christian doctrine and messianic dogma and doctrines that many of you have been a part of for the past decade or so, trying to seek out the truth and realizing that just leads you back into Levitical hierarchy and Jewish genealogy chasing. You see, it really is a time where we have renounced the establishment's religions, and therefore we will incur the wrath of that religious community, sometimes just with passing conversations with friends and sometimes with foes. For me, I've experienced it from the Messianic community, and of course, before that, the traditional Calvary Chapel community that I came out of. And for you, well, all of you, you have your own stories of how you were plucked out. But our author admonishes us, believe, stay the course, and stick with Yahweh, and you will be secure. Because ultimately, he has given us the victory at Yahusha's Exodus.
Time is truly running out. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 14 and 15. For we have become partakers of Messiah if we hold fast the beginning of our trust firm to the end. While it is said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. Do not harden your soul against his spirit speaking to you. Do not do that. And it cross-references Psalm 95. So let's close with this psalm. Come, let us sing to Yahweh. Let us raise a shout to the rock of our deliverance. Let us come before his face with thanksgiving. Let us raise a shout to him in song. For Yahweh is a great El and a great sovereign above all mighty ones, in whose hand are the depths of the earth. The mountain peaks are his also. His is the sea, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, Let us bow down and bend low. Let us kneel before Yahweh, our maker. For he is our Elohim, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you would hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in Meribah, as in the day of Massa in the wilderness, when your fathers tried me, have proved me, though they saw my work. For 40 years, I was grieved with that generation and said, they are a people who go astray in their hearts, and they do not know my ways. As I swore in my wrath, if they enter into my rest. He's calling. He's calling. Today, if you hear his voice, he's calling you to enter into his rest. All you have to do is bow your head, speak to him from your heart. Maybe you don't know much about his word. Maybe you don't know much about your creator. Tell him so. Tell him you want to learn. Ask him for forgiveness with a sincere heart. Ask him to lead and guide you through his word and teach you his word through his Holy Spirit. He lives, he hears, and he will answer. Today is the day. So thanks for joining us this Shabbat, and shalom in him and him alone.